John and Gina. Thank you for inviting me to the podcast. You asked me to share a story with your listeners. So I'm going to tell you about three people that I met in my 20s who have influenced the way that I practice law today. And this was before I became a lawyer, because I did not become a lawyer until I was 36 years old. I actually did not get my bachelor's degree until I was 30, and I had two children when I finished my bachelor's degree. And I went to law school with two young children, ages 7 and 2. So the three people that I met in my 20s that I still think about a lot today include a elderly lady that I was a neighbor of. When I was in my 20s, I was living in Brooklyn with my first husband, and we were renting an apartment that was within walking distance of my job. I was in nonprofit. I was working for an organization called Neighborhood Housing Services, and through my connections, I found a really great deal on the second floor of a brownstone. And on the first floor was a elderly woman in her late 80s. The house was owned by her son, who was a doctor, and I was able to negotiate at a time much like today when rents were high, interest rates were even higher, and I was able to negotiate a very nice rent on a beautiful 1,200 square foot apartment in Brooklyn, a couple blocks from my home. And part of that deal was that I would check on his mother. I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but I do remember visiting her. And one of the visits that has stuck with me all these many years later, I won't say how many, just many years later, was when she said to me that she didn't think much about how old she was, that she was still the same person she was when she was 19 years old. And it was only when she looked in the mirror that she remembered that she was now an old woman. But inside her soul, inside her heart, she was always the same person. And I was just in my 20s, and that stuck with me for throughout my life, and it sticks with me now as I deal with many clients who are her age and even older. And I remember how important it is when I go into nursing homes and I see the pictures of these people when they were young, to remember that these people are the same people. They might speak a little slower, they might have a little harder time remembering things, but their souls are the same. It's just that we treat them differently. And it's really important to remember that about our elderly, because if we're lucky, we're all going to get to that place one day. The other was another client at the Neighborhood Housing Services that I met. Neighborhood Housing Services was providing low interest loans to people in New York City who could not afford the double digit interest rates to repair their homes. And at that time, we offered subsidized loans from 3 to 10%. Believe it or not, 10% was actually the highest rate and was still considered a subsidized rate.
Wow.
Remember this man's name either, but I remember him so clearly because he was one of our clients who was borrowing money to fix. The whole idea was keeping up with the Joneses. If you fix your stoop, the next door neighbor is going to put in new windows for neighborhood revitalization, and it was very effective. And this man came into our office and he told me that he was in his 60s, he had recently retired, and he and his wife were looking forward to traveling. But instead, she had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And I will never, as long as I live, forget the look on his face that was just a mixture of fear and grief and pain and loss of all of the things that they were planning to do during retirement. And in my work as an elder law attorney, I work with a lot of people with family members with Alzheimer's. Some of my clients have been diagnosed and are in the early stages. So I often remember that man. And we now support the Walk to End Alzheimer's, and that has become a very important cause to me. And I can, see the through line back to my 20s when I met that man. And I will be forever grateful for that introduction to Alzheimer's, to know that it's a family disease that affects everyone, not just the person who's struck by the disease. Finally, the third person that I met in my 20s was my oldest son, Greg. And I didn't know at the time that Greg was going to teach me about special needs and mental illness, because he was a delightful, beautiful little child who was extremely bright, extremely talented, always was having his artwork on display, was part of the boys' choir, was always in the 98th percentile. And we told Greg, you can be anything that you want. And unfortunately, although there were symptoms at that time, mental illness was not diagnosed in children. And because he was the straight A student, there were no services available to him in the school to address the things that I was witnessing at home. And mental illness is a devastating disease that strikes people at the very beginning of adulthood, just when they're starting to venture out into the world between 16 to early 20s. And Greg has taught me about parenting a child, an adult child, with special needs, with mental illness. He taught me about the importance of public benefits like Social Security disability. He taught me about Medicaid. He taught me about the importance of having a power of attorney in place for your adult children when they turn 18. And everything I share about Greg is with his permission, and I thank him for that as well, because I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional.
It's okay.
But
Understandable.
when I share about my son with clients who have similar struggles, an immediate sense of relief that I understand what they're going through.
Sure.
And mental health is especially challenging because we have a very broken mental health system, and there are very few services available. And it taught me that by the time I was dealing with it with Greg, I'd already graduated law school. I was an educated, intelligent person, and I was struggling to find the services that he needed. So these three people have influenced my life to this day, and I think had a huge influence on my choice to become an elder law attorney later in my career, because I didn't start out as an elder law attorney. I started out in the corporate sector. So I could go on for the entire session, tell you stories about that. But thank you for asking me to share a story. That's my story about the three people that have influenced my practice.
Thank you.
Well, hello, this is Don
And this is Gina.
with Focused Healthy Family, and today is podcast number 192. And we are speaking with Louise Paglin with the McIntosh Law Firm. We're going to be talking about seniors and elder law. Um, Before joining the McIntosh Law Firm, Lake Norman attorney Louise Paglin was the owner and founder of Paglin Law Office, a family-owned center law practice of providing estate planning, asset protection planning, and special needs planning for senior citizens, veterans, people with disability, and their families. Louise understands that providing legal services to families often involves planning and advocating for her clients' most precious assets, parents, children, spouses, siblings, relatives, friends, and pets. She dedicates her practice to families and small businesses and is passionate about helping her clients keep their family assets and financial matters private and their loved ones cared for. Louise is married and has two adult sons and two playful dogs. She enjoys spending time in the Blue Ridge Mountains, hiking, reading, cooking, playing with her dogs, and spending time with family, friends, and nature. Louise, thank you so much for being part. Really enjoyed it and very much enjoyed your story.
Yes, thank you for sharing such vulnerability of sharing about your own personal journey with your son. And we can appreciate that very much as we have children suffer with mental health issues.
And I choke up most of the time when I talk with them about my daughters and stuff when I get it. So yeah, it doesn't that doesn't seem to go away. That
Oh, does it?
because you think about, I know how much my daughters have influenced me and what I do and how I do things. So anyway,
Yeah,
but
it's like grief, isn't it? It gets easier to deal with, but it never truly goes away.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I always talk about with grief, you go from the anger and the suffering part of it to more of a more just sadness part of it,
Mhm.
and that, like I say, that doesn't go away.
Mhm.
So, well, we were going to talk about elder law, and one of the first questions I always have is, what is elder law? And it probably covers a lot, but I'd like to at least go for the general part of it anyway.
I think elder law really should be named family law, but that was already taken. The family law deals with people going through divorce and custody, and so almost the opposite of family law. But most law practices, like family law or criminal law or business law, real estate law, focus on the subject matter of what you are practicing.
Mm,
Elder law is more of an umbrella term because we can practice elder law and also practice different types of law within it. So elder law is really a focus on people who are over 65 and people with disabilities and veterans of any age. So it crosses a huge population. But the reason I like to think of it as family law is because many times when I'm meeting with the client might be the elderly person in their 80s, they will often have their family members with them for those consultations and meetings to assist with these complicated things. So I'm often dealing with multi-generational issues, multi-generational people in the same room, although I have to be clear about who the client is and who is assisting the client from an ethical point of view as an attorney. I have to make that clear to everybody involved. But elder law encompasses what makes elder law different really from estate planning attorneys is that we don't just do estate planning. We are looking at a broad range of issues such as veterans benefits, long-term care planning, possibly guardianship. Some elder law attorneys maybe bring lawsuits against nursing homes. I don't do that because I often have clients who are in nursing homes and I want to maintain a good relationship with those nursing homes. But it can be anything that, any kind of legal challenge that is related to age that people are dealing with as they age, or involves public benefits for people with disabilities. And with veterans, I don't do all kinds of veterans work. I just focus on a very narrow area of long-term care planning for veterans and what kinds of benefits are available for veterans that's related to long-term care and aging.
well,
So,
you mentioned, well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
so I should have said, and a big component of elder law is estate planning, which can be confusing in and of itself.
Sure.
So, well, let's go into that. What is estate planning? Because that I've heard that numerous times and don't really know what that is.
So estate planning is the process of planning for what happens to your property after you pass, because we're all going to pass one day. But it's also about planning for who's going to manage your property if you
Oh,
become disabled. I've worked with a disability rights group, did an internship when I was in law school, and they like to say that it's a class that the population of being a disabled person is a class that any of us can join at any time. And
Mhm.
I like to say, if we live long enough, we're all going to end up joining it because we're all going to need some assistance if we are fortunate enough to have a long life.
Sure.
So we're planning with wills and trusts for what happens to your property after you die. Sometimes we're planning with deeds and beneficiary designations are all part of estate planning. So you'll often hear financial advisors say they can help with estate planning, but really all they're helping with is beneficiary designations. They're not helping with
Okay.
wills, and they'll refer that out because that's the practice of law. Powers of attorney, trusts, those documents, HIPAA releases, who can get medical information about you, healthcare power of attorney, who's going to make healthcare decisions for you if you can't make them for yourself. Those are planning for we're alive, but we need some help with our property and with
mhm.
our person.
Mhm. Sure.
So where does when it comes to seniors, what's kind of the first place you end up starting with somebody with that? Do they wait till they're beyond what they can be, or do they start early? Or I guess that's kind of an open question, but
Well, it depends upon the person, because some start early. I had clients recently in their 60s that were very concerned about long-term care planning, and I told them that they were too young for the type of legal planning that I could do for long-term care planning, and advise them to look at long-term care insurance instead. And then I sometimes have clients who haven't done are in their 70s and have never created a will. And I have
Oh
other
my.
clients. I don't restrict my practice to only people over 65. So if I get a referral to a young couple, I'll work with them as well. Because they need estate plans too. They need to plan for who's going to take care of their children if something happens to them. So sometimes people put it off because they think it's very depressing to talk about these issues, which
Yeah.
is, I'm so used to it that it's not depressing for me. But I try to turn it around and remind people that we don't do this for ourselves. We
Hmm.
don't do estate planning for ourselves. We do it for the people we love. We do it for the people who are going to be stuck with, what are we going to do about mom? She can't, she's giving all her money away to a Nigerian prince she met on Facebook. Or, what are we going to, I went through an estate administration and I don't want to put my kids through that. What can you do to help me avoid that for my kids? So what we're always talking about is the people that you love. That's really what the conversation ends up revolving around. So I usually start the consultation by asking people what prompted them to make the appointment in the first place. So sometimes people make it, they're specifically looking for an elder law attorney because they really don't know where else to begin. So
Mhm.
I make it a point of my practice to know about services in the community like yours, so that depending upon where people are at, I can be a resource to them. And that's part of our aspirational goals as a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, is to not just focus on the documents, but focus on the entire family and then the client's needs, and try to be a resource to them. So I make a lot of referrals to other services as well.
Well, I'm kind of curious as to what happens, uh, you know, um, well, I'm just thinking if you don't have a lot of money at the end of your life, but you have a house and all that, what do you turn everything over to the state kind of thing?
Yeah,
And,
yeah. What happens if someone doesn't have an estate plan in place?
So the state has a plan for you if you
okay,
don't have an estate plan in place. It's not as scary as it sounds,
okay,
because it is designed to reflect what most people are going to want. But because you didn't make the plan, you get the plan that the state provides for you. So, and there's a lot of different ways that property can pass outside of the legal process of probate. Of probate involves submitting the will to the court, but it also involves what we call an intestate proceeding when somebody doesn't have a will. It's still probate. It's when the state is saying intestacy is when the state is providing the plan for you. A lot of people make assumptions that their spouse is going to get 100% of everything. And so, because these are such complicated concepts, I find, and you like stories, so I'll give you more stories.
okay.
I give a lot of stories as examples of
Mhm.
how to answer that question. For example, I got a phone call one time from a friend on behalf of a family member, or this often happens to lawyers. Anyway, the story was that this woman had married a man who owned a house just in his name. He had two children. He did not change the deed. He did not draft a will. Because it also matters whether it's money, it matters whether there's a beneficiary designation, it matters how the property is titled. So there's no one size, one answer fits all. But in this case, it was a perfect storm of situation that had happened. So this woman is living in this house with this man that she married, and he dies suddenly from like a heart attack or something like that. Because he had two sons and a wife, and this real estate was only in his name, that house now belonged partly to his widow and partly to his sons. And under the law, she could either choose what's called a life estate, which is the right to live in the house until she died, and then it would go 100% to the sons. Or she could own a third of the house and the sons would own 2/3 of the house, and it would be divided that way. So you can see how not having a will that says, I want my wife to have my house, or gifting the house to him and his wife, just not planning, create a result that nobody expected. because the expectation was, I'm the wife, I get everything. Well, that may be true up to a certain point, but if I start explaining all of that, you and your listeners are going to be a little overwhelmed by the details because it depends, like whether it's personal property and how much and at what level before it gets divided. So if you don't have a lot of money, then maybe the spouse is going to get it all if you're married. If you're not married, it's going to go to your parents.
Wow.
If you don't have children, if you do have children, it's going to go to the children. So it just depends, It depends on your situation, how much money you got, and what kind of property it is. So real property is the dirt and anything attached to it, and personal property is everything else, and that's divided even further. Those are legal concepts, but those concepts all matter as to how the property passes.
So what's the difference between estate planning versus a will? Is there a difference?
A will is part of the estate planning process.
Oh,
So a
okay.
will is a document. So estate planning, think of estate planning as the umbrella term that encompasses wills, trusts, powers of attorney, beneficiary designations, jointly owned property, property owned by husbands and wives, which is called tenants by the entirety. It's all part of estate planning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we always start with an initial consultation, and we always ask people to disclose where are their assets? How are they titled? Do they have beneficiary designations? Because think about an IRA. Most IRAs are going to have a beneficiary designation. That beneficiary designation is going to trump anything we put in the will. So if you have an IRA, and this does happen to people, if you're married and you name your wife as your beneficiary, and then you get divorced and you marry somebody else and you don't update your beneficiary designation, your ex-wife is going to get that IRA.
Okay.
So that's where planning comes in, and being aware, having some education and some understanding of how property passes so that you can make decisions about what you actually want to happen.
Sure. I recently was on the supporting end for my mother. She had luckily a great attorney. My father passed last year, and she actually was able to avoid probate. I think part of it was she had like her checking account said, or instead of and there were some things in place that got me thinking about uh, that would be beneficial to avoid because then probate costs money, and the attorney was going over all these different things for her, and it seemed like everything was set up pretty well in place with my father. I know the biggest thing I think was his social security check. She had to have a death certificate and all this different kinds of things to get that situation turned over to her.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize that when their spouse dies, they're only entitled to one social security check and they have to choose the higher of the two. So
Mm-hmm.
that can be a real loss for people that are living on, used to living on a fixed income of two checks, and then they find out, oh no, you're going to lose the lesser of the two. You're only going to get one. And I often tell people that in most cases, it's a simple, except for those unusual cases like the one I described. In most cases, for married couples, it's a pretty simple administration at the death of the first of the couple. It can become more complicated if there's not more extensive planning in place and beneficiary designations are not updated after when we have a widow or widower, because those things need to be reevaluated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because most married couples own their property together and it passes automatically to the spouse, or they have joint accounts, or they have beneficiary designations.
So one of the questions you put out there was about the difference between guardian and a power of attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah,
I always think of guardian as far as somebody younger, but it really goes into like even special needs and things like that, correct?
yeah, that's a really good point, because we had somebody call recently, said the receptionist said, does this go to you? She wants a guardian for her 12-year-old child or something like that. And I said, well, she is the child's guardian. As a parent, you are the natural guardian of your child unless you lost your parental rights through a court proceeding. We are all considered competent under the law unless a court of law determines that we are incompetent, meaning that we can sign documents, we can write checks, things like that. A power of attorney is a contract, basically. It's a legal document. It's a type of estate planning document where the principal, the person who signs the document, designates someone else to manage their finances, their legal maybe hire attorneys. It can be limited. You could, for example, if you're buying a house with your spouse and it's in another state, you may not want both of you to incur the cost of traveling to that state. You could sign a limited power of attorney authorizing your spouse to sign a legal contract on your behalf just for that limited purpose. Or you could sign one that is more general. Now, to sign a power of attorney, the attorney who's helping you with the power of attorney needs to determine that you have the capacity to understand what you're signing. That's an ethical obligation on the part of the attorney, because that could be challenged if you signed something and you didn't have the legal capacity, you didn't understand what you were signing. That power of attorney, there's two types in North Carolina. There's a healthcare power and a durable power. Think of the durable as a financial and legal power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney designates who's going to make healthcare decisions for you. If you need to be moved to a facility, they choose the facility, they work with the doctors. They can be the same person or a different person. The durable / financial power of attorney is the person who's making legal decisions, financial decisions, managing your bank account, signing contracts on your behalf. It can be broad in scope or it can be limited in scope. It can go into effect immediately after you sign it, or it can only go into effect if one or more doctors determines that you're incapacitated. A lot of times we'll get phone calls from somebody, they'll say, I need a power of attorney for my brother or my mother or my husband. We can't draft a power of attorney for the agent. We can only draft a power of attorney for the principal, because it's the principal who is our client who's designating somebody else. So what happens when someone doesn't have the capacity to sign a power of attorney? So I get a phone call from a family member who needs to sell his brother's house, right? Because his brother is incapacitated, he has dementia, and he needs the money from the house, calls and says, I need a power of attorney. Well, your brother needs to be the one scheduling the appointment, meeting with me. He can bring you in, but I have to determine. Well, the more I find out about it, I say, well, you need to talk to you need to have your brother get a note from the doctor saying he has capacity, because I have concerns about his capacity based on what you're telling me. And instead I get a note that says he doesn't have the capacity. Well, now I haven't met with the brother, and I purposely didn't want to meet with the brother because I didn't want to establish an attorney-client relationship with the brother, because then I wouldn't be able to help the other brother who is initially seeking, because that's what we would call a conflict of interest. We can't go against somebody that we have an attorney-client relationship with.
Mhm.
So that's an ethical requirement on lawyers. So in that case, the only way to help that brother sell his house to pay for his care was to have him declared incompetent by a court of law and ask the court to appoint someone to represent him. That person is either the guardian of the person making healthcare decisions, residential decisions, or the guardian of the estate managing their finances. Or if they're doing both, we call them a general guardian. And then if it's the guardian of the estate, they have to make reports to the court. We had to get permission of the court to sell the house. It's not something that can be done without permission of the court. A power of attorney, while it designates somebody else to make decisions for you, it doesn't stop you from making decisions for yourself.
Okay.
So go back to the lady that's giving all her money away to somebody in Nigeria, right? And I just use Nigerian prince because not to be pejorative of Nigerians. I've met many lovely Nigerians. I just remember that being a thing going around on Facebook. We can't stop her from giving that money away unless the money is not available to her. And there's two ways that money could not be available to her. One is it could be in a trust that is managed by someone else, or she could be declared incompetent And then she no longer has the legal capacity to make those decisions herself. And that guardianship should only be used as a last resort. And our statute actually says that if there's less restrictive alternatives like powers of attorney, joint accounts that can be used safely, then we should use those. But it's really about protecting the incapacitated person.
Sure. And it sounds like a facility I work at, there was a resident. I never got to meet her, but apparently she was falling for scams on the internet. You know, she was an elderly person. She was buying gift cards and sending them to this person. She thought she was going to be marrying someone. And the family, my understanding is they brought to court and tried to deem her incompetent, but the judge did not. She was able to fool him enough that that they were not able to do that. And so she's making, you know, all these decisions. And it actually turned out she had a lot of money, but spent it all to the point where she was not paying her rent anymore and actually had to be evicted. Um, and so I guess it's complicated as far as a judge deeming someone incompetent. Um, you know, you can't just assume that you're going to be able to establish that if someone is making poor decisions or showing a cognitive decline.
Well, and that's the thing that lawyers don't like about going to court. And a lot of the work that we do is purposely done to avoid going to court. We want to protect our clients from going to court. I see somebody's pet there.
Yes. She
Just
likes my
waving,
lap when we're on podcasts.
just waving with her tail. Um, yeah, because court is unpredictable. I mean, judges are human beings and they have their own ways of looking at things, and they are, you know, you can appeal a judge's decision, or in a case of guardianship, the clerk of court's decision, but that's no guarantee that you're going to win. It's also expensive. So a lot of times for my elderly clients, we talk about the possibility of being scammed, particularly as we get older. All the scientific research shows that that part of our brain is affected first, our ability to manage finances, to use good judgment. There's a documentary on Hulu called Hey Beautiful. Now, these are about women who were scammed on the internet, on Facebook, and they do not seem to meet the definition of incompetency at all. They are clearly shameless. I don't know how they could have allowed themselves to participate in this documentary, because it is about this guy scamming them out of hundreds of thousands, if not more, dollars through Facebook, and with AI, it's just going to get worse. So what we talk about is sometimes a trust can, so a trust, all of these estate planning documents, as long as a person has not been declared incompetent, they can revoke them and they can change them.
Okay.
But for most people that are suffering from some cognitive decline, they may not have the capacity to go through the process of doing that. So a trust, even a revocable trust, can provide some protection during incapacity that a power of attorney cannot. Again, I'll give you another story, okay? Client, married couple, go to a lawyer, not this law firm, but go to a lawyer and have a joint revocable trust drafted. And husband dies first. Wife is the remaining trustee of this revocable trust. Revocable meaning they have complete control over it. They can change it. They can revoke it. They can put money in. They can take money out. They have one child, an adult, who is the successor trustee if his mother is not able to serve. Mother develops dementia. She's already got a history in her personality of being somewhat of a spendthrift and spending money rather recklessly. And of course, it's just exacerbated by her condition, because now people are taking advantage of her. And there are, you know, plenty of evil people out there. Some of them are right in the client's own family, who are more than happy to take advantage of elderly people or people with mental disabilities. And that's really what dementia is. It's a type of mental disorder. And so now her son is concerned, what am I going to do? Because she needs to go into a memory care unit, and she's going to, just like the person that you described, she may give all of her money away. She might deed the house away, and then there won't be anything left to take care of her. So we look at the trust that was created by another law firm, and we look at the definition of incapacity. I look at all of the documents. They did a great job. He had the healthcare power of attorney. He had the HIPAA release that allowed him to speak to her doctor and get medical records. We look at the definition of incapacity, and I draft something for him to give to the doctor that mirrors the definition of incapacity in the trust document, which basically is a doctor says she cannot manage her affairs. Okay, no requirement that she be determined incompetent by a court of law, just that her attending physician signed something saying. So he gets this from the doctor. We're able to then draft some legal documents that say, and point to the letter from the doctor that she is not capable of being the trustee anymore. This document has a trigger in it that he now becomes the trustee. He's able to take these documents to the bank, remove her from the account where she is just taking money and spending it wildly. We're able to put the house in the name of the trust to protect her from giving it away. And he's able to put her on a budget. I said, here, it's a Struling card. You can give her, let her spend some money, but you can see what she's doing. You can keep her on a budget. And that worked great. She didn't, as long as she was able to spend some money, felt like she had some autonomy, he was able to manage things for her. So these estate planning documents, if done right, can be really, really helpful to protecting people during their elder years.
Well, in there, you mentioned about Medicare, and I was kind of curious. We had somebody on talking about Medicare and especially the upcoming stuff. But how do you get involved with Medicare? And you talk about long-term care, whether Medicare covers that or not. So I'm kind of curious as to how you get involved with it.
Well, mostly I get involved in the context of having a client who is in the nursing home. In North Carolina, most of the long-term care benefits that are available to people really only apply to nursing home care. A lot of people assume that they won't be eligible for nursing home care, but for public benefit, for Medicaid in a nursing home, but it just really depends upon, whether they're working with somebody like me and what the situation is. I think of it as really targeted towards middle class people. If you have, a huge amount of money, but if you're middle class, we might be able to save some of your resources. Medicare will only cover the first 100 days a person is in a skilled nursing facility, and it can be even less than 100 days. 100 days is the maximum. But for Medicare to even cover that, there's all these convoluted rules that first you have to go to a hospital and spend 3 nights in a hospital and then be transferred to a skilled nursing facility that provides rehab. And then if you still need to be there after 100 days, Medicare says, okay, you're on your own now. And then we're looking at what other resources are there. And the only other resources are private pay, long-term care insurance if you have it, and many people don't, or Medicaid. So there's a lot of education that I have to do with clients about the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, because we're all paying into the Medicare system our entire, younger lives, and we don't get anything back until we're 65. And people are often surprised to find that it's not going to help with home care unless it's a medically, if a doctor prescribes occupational therapy or physical therapy, or nurse has to come to your home. It's not going to cover somebody coming in and helping you get dressed, or helping you toilet, or helping you, transfer from the bed to your walker. Or just provide basic companionship, which is so important to keeping people healthy and safe and at home as long as possible. So it can be frustrating for me because all of us want to stay home as long as possible. And when I have to explain to people that financially, sometimes people are better off in a nursing home than at home, it's a very hard conversation to have, because nobody wants to be in a nursing home. It's the place of last resort. So that's how it comes up in conversations with my clients. Is there is now I believe it's a maximum of $6,000 now that is under, what in the last administration was passed to help with dementia care, that can help with respite care, but it's very limited to dementia that is now available under Medicare. But you also, it's only available under original Medicare. And right now we're in Medicare open enrollment season. So you're hearing a lot of advertising about getting a Medicare Advantage program. Those programs, and I don't want to get sued for saying this, but those programs can work very well if you're a little bit younger. And I mean, like between 65 and maybe 85, and you don't have a lot of healthcare needs, then, you know, financially, that's going to be a great deal for you. It's also can be a great deal for people like my son with disabilities who are on Medicaid and Medicare because they can get some extra benefits. But for people that might go into a nursing home or need some dementia care, the benefits can be a little bit more restrictive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually interviewed someone who deals with
Medicare.
yeah, and went over the different options with Advantage plans, and yeah, just kind of went into detail about that and recommending, you know, seeing an independent agent who's in your interest and not, you know, being pulled in by these phone calls from particular companies because yeah, they are very different plans. And as an occupational therapist who's worked in long-term care, people learn the hard way sometimes, you know, about their plans that they thought were great plans, and then they don't cover a lot of things. So,
Well, John Oliver just did a special on it too, which was very interesting too, talking about Medicare and I'll like you talked about there's a certain point that it doesn't work out for a lot of people.
And it can be shocking to people. I mean, I'm working with a couple who, you know, are shocked that their prenuptial agreement doesn't make any difference to Medicaid if somebody ends up in a nursing home. You know, it's like, yeah, that works for divorce, but Medicaid doesn't care. And, you know, so these are extremely complicated topics, extremely complicated legal topics, which is part of the reason why I'm very, very busy because there are not a lot of lawyers who are knowledgeable in this area. I do want to put out a shout out to Erin Egan, who is a wonderful independent Medicare broker. And I will be happy to share her contact information with you. I think she'd make a great guest.
thank
Yeah,
you.
that would
Thank
be
you.
great. Well, you know, like I said, this is a conversation that has so many extensions to it. I would love to talk more, but I guess since we're kind of coming down to the end, a couple of things I would ask is you know, is there any other recommendations you would give to somebody that's thinking about this or getting involved in this?
Yeah, like as far as what first steps they should take.
Well, if you know, the biggest mistake that because there aren't that many people that understand how to navigate the Medicaid system when someone's in a nursing home. The biggest mistake that I see that people make is waiting too long to call someone like me who is familiar with the rules, because oftentimes if they wait, by the time they see me, we if we had gotten started sooner, we could have saved them a whole lot more money because their goal is to get their loved one on Medicaid because the cost of nursing home care is about $13,000 a month. And so that will very quickly deplete most people's savings. I say middle class people if they don't have long-term care insurance. And also review your estate plans every 5 years or so. Make sure that they still reflect your wishes, that if something was to happen to you, that this is how you would want your property to go, and that the people that you have designated as your agents are still the people you would want to be your agents, because it is the type of thing that people do procrastinate about. And so once they do it, they may stick it in a drawer somewhere or a safe deposit box and forget about it for a long time. And things could have changed in their family, you know, and they haven't revisited it. So they could have named somebody who, when they were younger, seemed to be very responsible, but has since, you know, developed a drinking problem or a drug problem, that they're not the best person to be managing your finances if you become disabled yourself.
Sure. Well, Thank you. There's so much information here, and I know it's been helpful to us, and I'm sure our viewers as well. And there's probably other additional topics we could get into at greater length that we hope to do in the future. So thank you so much, Louise, for being here with us, for sharing your stories and all this information and your your years of experience dealing with elder law.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
And before we stop there, to give what's the place they can find more about you, your web address and other things.
Okay, so the website is Macintosh Law Firm, spelled without an A in Mac. So it's MCINTOSH lawfirm.com. And then if you click on the list of attorneys, you can find my bio there and you can reach out there. Or you can contact my paralegal directly, and her direct line, her name is Amanda Wendorf, and her phone number is 980-689-4305. Do not call me because you will be routed to my paralegal anyway. Same if you email me and want to make an appointment, we will route you to my paralegal. She handles all my scheduling. We are scheduling 3 months out because we are very grateful. We have wonderful referrals and wonderful clients that refer to us. So if you do want to make an appointment, just be prepared for that. That if you're in a hurry, we do block out some for emergency appointments, like people in nursing homes and things like that. We block out so that we can get them in if we have to.
Thank you so much, and we'll have all that listed for our viewers and listeners to see as well. So thank you so much, everyone. This is our podcast for today. We hope you've enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you. Please leave us a comment, give us feedback, like, and subscribe to this podcast. Don and I in our business are here to guide you through caring for your aging loved one, and we bring you topics like this with wonderful speakers who can share additional information. You can learn more about Don and I at our website at focusedhealthyfamily.com, learning how we play a role in helping care for your aging loved ones. Learn more about Don's EFT tapping practice, and join him every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where he goes through a tapping session. So you can jump on and learn about it, as well as looking at the website for other resources. Again, you can find us at Focused Healthy Family. We're on Facebook at Focused Healthy Family, Instagram, Focused Healthy Family 1, on YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. Again, these podcasts are aired on YouTube as well as anywhere you listen to a podcast. We air these every Thursday, so join us next week. Be sure to check out prior podcasts, like we mentioned a previous podcast just a couple weeks ago where we did interview someone who does Medicare and insurance options for people over 65. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.